Hey folks, I'm Kenny Cummings from NYC Norton. I'm going to give a quick tutorial here on safety wiring, particularly with AHRMA's requirements with safety wiring on a vintage bike. This is a Sealy Matchless G50 500 Premier race bike in AHRMA. It has drum brakes and separate engine and gearbox and oil tank, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great candidate to show requirements for safety wiring, and so we'll go from there. I'm going to do this in components. I'll do the front end, work my way back to the engine, the gearbox, oil tank is a big one, onto the rear wheel and the exhaust here. Each of these have very specific wiring requirements. So we'll start with the front wheel. First on our list is the front end and the brakes. Very important on a racing motorcycle. More important than going fast is being able to slow down if you get yourself into trouble, and a street bike as well. All motorcycles, brakes are probably the most important thing we deal with. So lock wire requirements with AHRMA and in general on brakes and front end, super important. So we're going to start here and then work our way back. As we come down here, my friend Tom's manning the camera here. I'm going to show you here at the front axle. It's got to be tied up. In this case, we have a Norton fork slider. It's got a nice boss here, so I can tighten this. I can tie this up and in a tightening direction of the axle. You always want to pull your fasteners in a tightening direction, and 99% of those are clockwise. So you want to be pulling in a clockwise fashion. Here I'm going straight up to this slider. If you don't have bosses like this on your fork slider, you could drill. You know, sometimes I see people drill a little angle through there with their drill bit and tie it up to there. Sort of like what we've done here on this torque arm, which is a nice segue here as I go up to this torque arm. This is a brake stay that stops the brake from rotating when you actuate the brake. And these torque arm bolts are so important because these hold the brake from rotating when you're going down into turn 5 at Barber and you grab a handful of brake. You don't want that brake rotating. So this torque arm being tied up here in a tightening fashion, pulling it clockwise. I drilled the torque arm up here to pull this wire to. Also, the torque arm is mounted up here on the mudguard mounting bosses, and it's wired inside there. A little bit thinner safety wire in there just to make it manageable when we tie up in there. Thanks, Tom, for getting the tight shot on that. Another thing, there's oil inside the fork sliders. So there's an oil drain bolt right here, and I have this pulled down to this boss down here. Very important. Anything that has oil in it has to be safety wired. On this case, when you've got a front brake and it's lifting this thing up, these there are little pins in here and they're held in by cotter or R-clips, and I've got these R-clip safety wire. Can you see that little bit of safety wire right there? That I tie these R-clips up so they can't come loose. So these pins can never come out. So we got safety wire holding those R-clips on the linkage piece that hold the brake as I actuate it. So as we move up here from the linkage, let's come up here to this brake line here. This is a big deal that a lot of people don't think about. This is the brake line going into the adjuster, and if you grab a handful of brakes and then you let go, sometimes these things can pop out and then you lose your brakes. So we actually safety wire this cable from itself down to the adjuster, and that stops this cable from accidentally popping out in the heat of the moment. You run off the track, and this will keep your lines in. And having said that, Tom, let's move up to the lever, and I want to show the guys up here at the lever the safety wire that we do up here. If you can get a focus here on this part of the brake lever here, you can see I've got it safety wired right here. These are the cables up here, and I've got it pulled up here. So these cables can't pop out of this equalizer here on this brake here. As I pull this here, these cables are always held in place because, again, these could pop out and then you lose actuation of your brake. Having said that, same thing with the throttle here. This is a really nice throttle here, and I've got the cable and it's pulled up and tied to the adjuster here. So this can't pop out. God forbid that pops out, you're at full gas, you roll off the throttle, that thing pops out and keeps your carb slide held open, and you're gonna go full blast into a corner. So no amount of brake's gonna stop you if the bike's going full blast there. So this is very important to tie your throttle cable up. And having said that, let me lift the tank off here, Tom, and let's look at the top of the carb. I've got this cable that's wired down to the adjuster at the top of the carburetor. Again, super important. If you chop that throttle and you're going into a corner and you're on the brakes, if this pops out of the top of the carburetor, holds the slide open, and you go into the corner full gas, and you're not gonna get out of that corner in any elegant way. You never want that to pop out. So tying these throttle cables in is a big thing that AHRMA looks for, and it's a safety measure there, big time. We're going to go through the engine now. This is a big one of the biggest ones of safety wiring. Starting with the sump of the engine, that is AHRMA's number one thing to safety wire, is to stop oil from coming out onto the racetrack. You cannot get oil on the racetrack because bikes fall down in oil. It's very slippery. AHRMA mandates a belly pan, and I love the fact that they have belly pans, because when an engine blows up, it captures that oil, or most of that oil, and keeps it off the track, so guys that are behind you aren't going to come in and slip on your oil. So wiring up the sump, the bottom drain bolt on your sump, every bike has one, is a very big deal, but it's also obscured by your belly pan. So I want to show us very clearly how we do it here at NYC Norton, but also what AHRMA likes and requires. So we're going to crawl under the bike now and have a look at that, and then we'll go through the oil lines, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, here we have a good look at the underside of our matchless G50 engine. This is the sump plate here. Every bike has a different setup here, but pretty much every bike has the drain bolt right here, which is important that that bolt gets wired. Let's see if I can get a good shot under there. You can see how it's wired there. And this wire is pulled up to the frame. We do that. AHRMA's going to want to look at this at tech inspection to make sure that the drain is wired. They have cameras that can go down underneath here, so if your belly pan is on the bike here, they can see down under here. But I like to pull it to the frame, and it gives them a good visual of where to start looking for the sump there. As I move up here to the bike, everything that holds oil needs to be wired, and we're going to go up to the oil tank here. This is a big one in a second. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about these oil lines that are coming in from the oil tank. You'll notice they have hose clamps on them and safety wire. This is belt and suspenders. It's required by AHRMA. You go down to tech, if you don't have the safety wire on and you only have the hose clamps, they're going to send you back to your pit and make you put that safety wire on. I just want to show you the oil lines here that come down from the head, the drain here that goes back into the crankcase. This is the inlet. This is the big feed to the engine. This is a very important one coming back from the oil tank here, and the return back to the tank. All of those have to be wired. Safety wired. Here's another drain from the front of the head, gets wired here. That's a very big deal. Got to make sure they're all wired. Moving up to the oil tank, this is full of oil, and we don't want any of this on the racetrack. Every fitting, as I mentioned, gets a hose clamp and safety wire. Hose clamp, safety wire. Super important. Let's move on to the gearbox here, and I'll put the camera underneath the gearbox and we'll go from there. On this G50, we have a separate gearbox. This is the back side of the gearbox here. We're looking in, here's the sprocket and the clutch, and this is the drain right here. And I'll get my finger underneath here. This drain has to be lock wired. It's drilled sideways, and I've got it pulled down here to this frame rail here. And you can see here's a little bit of safety wire just dangling off here. And tech is gonna look at that. Anytime there's a separate gearbox, pre-unit construction, they're going to look for the drains on the gearbox as well. Very important. Gear oil is very, very sticky and slippery, and if that gets on the track, that's really bad stuff. So big time, got to lock up those drains on your gearboxes, folks. We're going to focus on the rear wheel and the rear spindle axle here for a second. One of the things about the rear wheel is the drum brake here. There's a lot of stuff to lock wire, but also, again, the torque arm in this case, very important. This gets lock wired up here. This is a little tab on my swing arm here, and this is a long torque arm here. And you can see it's wired up here, and it's wired back here as well. Again, you don't want that brake plate rotating when you hit the rear brake. And again, the cable here is wired. You can see I've got double loops of wire there, and I'm pulling it up to the adjuster here. That just keeps the cable seated so it doesn't pop out during actuation. Again, R-clips here that are wired. Every single one of them has got a little bit of safety wire on there. And then Tom, let's move down to the spindles here. Very, very important. A very visible thing that every tech inspection is going to look for. These have to be wired. I've got these drilled on two sides, so when you tighten the axle, you can index it. In this case, I got it pulled straight back, so it's pulling it, it can't rotate in either axis. And I have a little thing, this is not required by AHRMA, but it's something that I've learned over the years. I like to put my spindles through this way and put the nut on this other side. Let's just move around to the other side and I'll explain why I do that. So, when you've got your axle here lock wired and it's going through from right to left, and then the nut is on the left-hand side. And the reason I like to put the nut on the left-hand side is because when that axle goes through and this wheel is turning clockwise like this, if there's any drag on the bearings on the axle, it's going to want to turn the axle clockwise as well. So when you have the nut on the other side, it's actually in a tightening fashion, and it's tightening the axle. I've had axles come through from left to right, and as it drags and spins, it starts to loosen that nut, and that's scary stuff. You know, if your lock wire breaks and that nut comes loose, your axle comes out. So I like to always put my axles in from right to left. Let's walk over here, Tom, and have a look here. So here's the nut that I'm talking about. The axle would be spinning in this orientation in a counterclockwise direction, which would be tightening against this nut in normal operation. Also, Tom, pan out over here and let's look at this rear chain. This is required by AHRMA to lock wire the master link on your chain. It's very simple to do. You just pull it up, cut it off, fold it over, and it stays put. And surprisingly, there it keeps your master link as it goes around the sprockets, comes right back up, and that will last for a long time. Surprising that, and it does great things. It keeps that master link plate from popping off. And again, over here on this brake lever, this is a British bike, shifts on the right, brake on the left. We've got the cable pulled up here, and yeah, that's a big lock wire piece. So I'm going to focus on this crank nut here. This is unique to the G50. It's got a little flapper valve in here, and we have this nut lock wire, but every bike has a crankshaft, and I like to lock wire the crank nut and onto the belt drive pulley here. I've just drilled the pulley up here, and I pull the wire up to the hole in the pulley. That keeps that crank nut on and keeps the pulley on and keeps the primary on. You don't want that stuff flying off in operation. Another big thing that AHRMA requires is your exhaust to be safety wired, and that's sort of hard for people to understand what that means, and I'm going to show you some of the details. The mounting points here, I've actually drilled this tab, and we pull the lock wire up to this tab here. This is required by AHRMA to have the mounting points, but also this spring. These are slip-on exhaust cans, a silencer can here. And this spring, I don't know if you can see it, but there's lock wire that runs in through the center of the spring, and it stops the spring from bouncing off and flying down the track and hitting you in the helmet, which has happened to me more than once, actually, have a spring pop up and hit you in the helmet as you're racing down the front straight of a track. So big deal here to lock wire this. That's about it with the G50 here. I also want to show you guys a vintage bike that has disc brakes and some of the lock wire requirements that are unique to vintage disc brake setup. So we're going to move over to a different bike here. So here we have a disc brake bike. This is also a Sealy 750 Commando here. What we have that's different from the drum brake bikes is hydraulic brakes, and there's fluid that goes down through here. So we have the brake lines that are safety wired. I just have it tied up here to the caliper fasteners, and the caliper fasteners have to be wired as well. So we've got the caliper fastener wired from each fastener there, and then we've got the brake line also wired there. And this is the drain bolt here. Again, there's oil behind here. This has silicone over it, which AHRMA will allow if that's plastered up there with silicone as opposed to being wired, because this is a flush mount fastener. It's hard to get safety wire on it. That is passable by tech. Sometimes people will wrap a little piece of duct tape around there just to stop those from coming out because there is oil inside those sliders. So that's a disc brake setup on a vintage bike. Okay, folks, I'm going to give a safety wire.
Get your shit together.
Right? Come on, Brando. Okay, folks, I'm going to give a safety wire tutorial here. The first thing you're going to need is a good set of safety wire pliers. Don't cut corners on these because you're going to have them for the rest of your racing life, and a good set is a really nice tool to have in your box. We also use good stainless steel safety wire. This is 032 gauge. We use it on 90% of the bike, 032. There's some little fussy fasteners we use 023 on, which is thinner and a little easier to get into tight spaces, but 032 is a good grade. I'm gonna safety wire the front axle nut, and we've got this nut drilled here, and let's get the camera down here, and you can see the hole is drilled here on the back side of that nut. And what I'm gonna do is run the wire through there, and I've got to pull this nut. Anytime you safety wire something, you have to pull it in a tightening direction. So we're going to wire it, and we're actually going to pull this in a clockwise direction. I'd love to pull it back to this back lug, but that would be loosening it. So I'm going to wrap the wire around underneath here, and I'm going to pull it up to the front of this lug. You can also see I've got this forked drain bolt right here that's wired. There's oil behind there, so that's a very important one. I'm just going to tie it to the same place there. I'm not going to tie it to the same wire. Never do wire-to-wire safety wire. That's not cool. So I'm going to run this through, twist it, pull it up to there, and you'll see what we do. Cut off a length of safety wire that I can fold in half and still have enough to do this here. Feed this through the bottom, and I just kind of pull it up and take a measurement with my thumb about how long I want to go. Pull it back, and I'm going to clamp these on where I took my measurement from. They're clamped on there, and then we do our twists. Twist, twist, twist. I don't want to go too tight because you can break the safety wire and then you got to start all over, but you want it tight, but not too tight. You'll get a feel for this over time. This is pretty good here. Now I'm going to wrap it around here, and I'm going to come up to the lug. Perfect. It's a good length. I'm going to feed this end through the lug here. Bring it on down. I'm going to pull this through nice and tight. So we're, again, pulling that nut tight so it can never loosen in operation. And then I just put the wire back on here, get myself another few twists on this end of it. Then I'm going to cut off this pigtail. And I'm going to bend this over so it doesn't snag you. If you're sliding down the racetrack, you don't want this to snag your hands or your leathers or anything. And also think of your cool AHRMA tech inspector who doesn't want to run his hand down there and snag that safety wire. So there it is. It's all done. It's pulling in a tightening direction, a clockwise direction, and pulling it up to that lug. That will pass AHRMA tech. I also want to say these little pigtails that you cut off, these are lethal. If these get in your tires, you could have a sudden deflation on the racetrack, fall down. Don't want that. When you're safety wiring, gather up your pigtails like this and toss them away. You don't want them in your neighbor's tires either. Here it goes, into the round file. Boom. So I want to give a demonstration about safety wiring oil lines. There are a lot of videos out there where you can go and learn about how to do safety wiring properly, how to drill fasteners, pull in the right direction. It's an old aircraft technique, and it's been around for years and years, and there's a lot of people that are very good at this. So I'm not even going to try and compete with that so much as just to talk about what's required on a vintage race bike, particularly with AHRMA's tech inspection, and the oil lines going into the engine is huge. So I'm actually going to cut the safety wire off here and redo it and show you how I do it. So this has got a double wrap of safety wire on here. So let me just cut this sucker off. Just pull this right off here. So I've got safety wire here. It's 032 gauge. It's 32 thousandths. And this is kind of heavy stuff, but I use it for 90% of the safety wiring I do. For the little fussy stuff, I use 023, 23 thousandths. In this case, we're going to use 032. And I'm going to cut off the length of this here, and I'm going to do a double wrap around this oil line. So what I do is I kind of work up here, give myself a little space to work. You know, I want to tie it up here where it's going into the fitting, but I'll do a couple of wraps around here like this. On this one, I'm going to do 3 wraps just for today's demo. So we've got this wrapped around here 3 times. And again, belt and suspenders, because we've got the hose clamp that probably does 90% of the work, but AHRMA requires safety wire, and they'll send you back if you don't have it. And you want to do this in your shop. You don't want to do this at the racetrack if you don't have to. So I got it wrapped around here, and I'm going to grab this with my cool safety wire pliers, cinch them together and hold it tight, and then I'm going to kind of just line these up in a nice organized fashion here and start to pull things tighter. And you see how I've got these 3 loops now, and they're tightening up here, and as I pull tight, there we go. That's nice. Okay, now I'm going to grab my safety wire pliers here and pull tight. Look at that. 1, 2, 3. Back up here just a little bit, Tom, so we get the safety wire action here. Watch these pliers as they spin. And you don't want to go too tight. You don't want to break your safety wire here. Just, you'll get a feel for this over time, and that's really good. That thing's not rotating. The wire tie is tight. I cut off here. Bend this back. You don't want to snag yourself. That hurts like hell if you've ever had safety wire poke you through the hand, and I guess everyone will have that at some point in time in their racing career. And yeah, just snug this up, tighten it up, make it look good. Push that down. That will pass tech. They would love you for that. That's a good job there. There's a good overview of a rather complicated, this G50 is a very complex vintage bike, separate oil tank, separate gearbox, etc. Your bike may be very different from this. You need to read the rule book and see what the safety wire requirements are, but I hit all the high points here. The sump drain bolt is a big one, all the oil lines, the brakes, the cables. That's what tech is going to look for, and sometimes tech will say, no, it's not right, Kenny, and they send me back. I'm always happy to have these guys looking out for our safety, a second set of eyes, even if I've worked on the bike for months and think I've crossed every T and dotted every I. That second set of eyes is much appreciated. As well, I've wired a lot of vintage bikes in my day, and I'm more than happy to help any new rider or any older rider for that matter that wants some advice on what they need to do to safety wire. So feel free to email me with any questions you have. Kenny Cummings, my email is info@nycnorton.com, and I'll help get you down the road and get you on the racetrack safely. I want to thank AHRMA's tech inspectors, good folks. They do this because they love the sport, and they want to get you out on the track safely so then you can go fast. Kenny Cummings, see ya.